Frequently asked question. Jamie, how do you manage your time? And I totally get the root of that question. It wasn't so long ago I was talking with Luis Magana, rookie owner. I'm juggling so many things. How do you just get things done? Or this morning I'm talking to Hector Patino and, work-life balance. When I'm at work, I'm thinking about my family and I'm kind of dropping the ball with family. Then I'm with family, I'm thinking about work and how I'm kind of dropping the ball with work. And, how do you get things done? So I get the question, and the short answer to how do you manage time is you can't. Nobody can speed time up and nobody can slow time down. So the concept of time management, there is no such thing as time management. So the real question is, how do you manage your priorities? That's really the question. It's all about priority management, not time management. So I could talk for hours about priority management, and I love that people feel confident coming to me because I do try to kick it up a gear. I am freaky about my time. I don't want to waste time. I don't want to get older and have regrets like, gee, there's so much I wish I would have done. No, I don't want to do that. So I am a little freaky about that. I've got 4 tips that I want to share with you here today. And again, I could talk for hours about this, but I'm going to try to condense this into 10 minutes for you. My first thought, and this one is fresh. I didn't have this thought 2 years ago, but I've got this thought now thanks to this wonderful book called Essentialism. Highly recommend this book. And there's a portion of this book I want to read to you, and it all comes down to the word priority. Okay, again, this topic is priority management. How do you manage your priorities? Well, straight from the book. First of all, the word priority means prior or former or first. And the word priority came into the English language in the 1400s. It was singular. It meant the very first or prior thing. It stayed singular for the next 500 years. Again, the word priorities never existed. Only in the 1900s did we pluralize the term and start talking about priorities. Illogically, we reason that by changing the word, we could bend reality. Somehow we would now be able to have multiple first things. And so as I read that, it really made me think gee, have I stacked too many priorities? Right? I've got all these priorities going on in my life. Well, again, if I had to narrow it down to one thing, if I had to take this plural word and somehow make it singular, what's the main thing? What's the priority to really focus on? So it might be too difficult to narrow things down to one word to make it a priority, but I do wonder sometimes, do you have too many priorities? Is there a way we could simplify life and bring it down to just a much smaller number and get back to the original word here, priority? So that's my first thought for you. I hope that just that fact of this word was introduced in the English language in the 1400s and then it got pluralized in the 1900s. I hope that makes you pause to really think about simplifying your life and getting down to the main core priorities, or if you can, the priority. My second thought is the word choices. I'm a big fan of great decision making, right? So make great decisions. You are not a product of your environment. You are not a product of your circumstances. You are a product of your decisions. Your decisions will shape your destiny, as Tony Robbins likes to put. And so I've got my children to memorize something. I highly recommend anybody watching this, feel free to adopt this. But there's a choice to make in everything you do. Just remember in the end, the choice you make makes you. I really believe that to be a true statement. So make good decisions. So I say to my son, right, I started teaching my son priority management or calendar management, however you want to look at it. And I said, listen, if you decide on the front end what's important to you, well, then you'll be able to make better decisions as time goes on, like what to do with your time. Right? If you don't decide on the front end, your priorities will be exposed through your decisions. So rather than being reactive, I'd rather be proactive. So let's think this through, son. So before we get into calendar, putting the big rocks in your calendar, let's just identify what's important to you. And it was a fun exercise. I've got my son's calendar right here, right? And you flip it open to page 1. It's got his values, it's got his roles, and it's got his mission statement. And so just one of the values that I'll share with you is fun and creativity. So Lego building and gaming. That's a value to him. So I'm okay with him scheduling time to do some gaming. Now, excessive gaming could be an issue, but identify the values first so then you can make good decisions. So I think before you really get into your calendar management, I think it's really important right off the bat is like, do you have a mission statement? Do you have values? And do you have your roles clearly identified? When that stuff is clear, I'm telling you, the rest of this gets a little simpler. Recently, I've been reading the Real Book of Real Estate by Robert Kiyosaki. I really want to get strong in my real estate business as I'm acquiring properties and having rental income, all that other stuff. And so I'm kind of like, duh. There was in the beginning of the book, he clearly explains that. Like, what are the values that you have for your real estate business? What's the mission statement of your real estate business? And I'm kind of like, oh man, I should have already known that. I mean, when you get clear on that, well, then you'll really start being able to identify what kind of property you want to buy. Is it commercial? Is it residential? You'll just get clarity on that when you start with the values. Again, if you don't start with the values, if you don't start with clearly identifying what's important to you, well, then you're shopping around for too many decisions, but you can limit the decisions if you're clear on the values. My third thought for you is really a question. What's your relationship with your calendar? Do you have a relationship? Do you guys get along? Do you even communicate? Do you talk to each other? Do you look at each other? What's your relationship like? So years ago, I was lucky enough to have lunch with John Maxwell, right? So, I spent weeks preparing, like, what do I want to get out of this lunch with John? What are my questions? What do I want to learn? And so I asked the question that I'm posing to you right now. What's your relationship like? Like, John, how do you manage your time? I felt like I knew him well enough. I knew he's married to Margaret, a redhead. So, hey, we have something in common here, John. You've got 3 kids. You've got 9 grandkids. I mean, I studied him. I read all his books, so I knew a lot about him. And I knew he's traveling all over the place. He's got a ton going on in his life. How do you manage your time was my question. And so I couldn't believe the answer. And the answer was, listen, him and his assistant, Linda Eggers, right? They spend 2 days, right? So I just pictured 8 to 12 hours a day, 2 full days, 2 working days, planning the next 40 days. Like they spent 2 days to plan 40, from where he was going to be, his time with his wife, his time with his kids. I mean, his time was precious, obviously, and he wanted to get things done. So, interesting formula. I've never adopted it. I don't take 2 full days to plan the next 40, but that's what worked for John. All I know is everybody has some kind of relationship with their calendar. My current relationship is this. I'm the boss of my calendar for 1 hour per week. I'm the boss. Okay? My calendar doesn't push me around. I'm the boss. I'm the one in charge here. I own it for an hour, and then it owns me for the next 167 hours. That I want to plan it. I want to be, intentional with what I'm doing. I want to put my big rocks in there, and then my calendar dictates what's going on in my life. So I told Hector even this morning, I'm like, listen, when you do your weekly planning, I know he does his weekly planning. I get an email every week on what the agenda is. I'm like, hey, maybe put the rough draft together. Before you pull the trigger, you just put the rough draft together. Then you sit down with your loved ones, the people that matter most, and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm thinking of doing this next up and coming week. These are the priorities. I know I just ran a whole subject on the word priority instead of priorities, but here's what's important to me. What do you think? Well, I think, maybe you and I need more time together on Tuesday, or maybe we should do this on Wednesday. But as people get involved in the ownership of your planning, and they're like, okay, listen, I like this. Now that I've had some input on this, I like your plan for the week. Well, then you can execute. You can go into the next week with all the confidence in the world that you've got the support of your loved ones to get out there and just go kick some butt. Whether it's at work, whether it's at play, whether it's with your family, like you get some buy-in around the plan for the week. Again, create that rough draft. Again, I create the rough draft for 1 hour, and then that calendar owns me the next 167 hours. very meticulous, very intentional with my time. My last thought is don't leave success up to chance. You can't be indifferent about success. You can't be indifferent about living the life that you really want to live. I just find successful people are intentional, okay? Intentionality is key. Like nobody trips and finds themselves on top of the mountain. Don't trip, don't stumble, or oh, here I am at the top. No, you've got to climb. There's got to be something really intentional. There's got to be a push, upward mobility. It takes intentionality to accomplish major meaningful milestones like marriage or career, business, family. Again, intentionality is the key. So don't leave success up to chance. Own it. Figure out your priorities, figure out your values, try to limit it, try to keep it simple. And those are my tips for you on really accomplishing great things and being successful really in your family life and being successful in your business life.